But I think
Hmm.
definitely ideas. Like our idea right here, like just the idea to do this. Obviously, the platforms that exist, like YouTube and cameras and the community, but all those were also ideas. In our country, to access the higher forms of power like wealth, you have to have good ideology. That's the power. That is a great. This is a great podcast. That is the power of democracy and independence. But you get on Facebook, you get invited to 5 different Christian groups. Okay, and they're all troll farms probably, or maybe 3.5 out of the 5 are likely to be troll farms, right? Listen to them and I say, oh, okay, I understand your ideas. I trust this book that you recommend. Then I read the book. Okay, I trust them even more. Then you trust that circle. Then you start to develop layers of personal response. I call them layers of understanding.
Welcome to A&B Mastering the Mind. I'm Alex Crowley.
Hello, I'm Bradley Moore, and on this podcast, we believe your prosperous, your purposeful, your driven life is being stolen from you by your need for cultural comfort, the need to fit in with your homies, your girls, your family pressure. We're here to hopefully give you some sort of path out using our valuable, hopefully, discussion here where we basically just talk about things that are like affecting your ability to reach your goals or set goals or making you feel like you can't set goals, so you just continue going on in the daily churns and butter of life, right? You're just churning the butter of life. And we're here to take that butter, okay? And we're going to give you a recipe on how to make a cake out of that butter. Or some cupcakes, whatever you want, baby. That was a fire analogy. That's going to be in the intro. I can hear the music now. Dun, 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 make that cake. Okay, anyways. Alex picked our topic today. I'm pretty excited. We're kind of flipping roles this time. So I just get to sit here and drink tea, and I'm looking forward to it. So go ahead, Alex.
Well, nice to meet you all. Nice to see you all, and thank you for clicking on this
Mm-hmm.
morning's episode. So, like Bradley said, as usual, he is the one who usually hosts these podcasts, and you guys are used to me, responding very long responses I usually give. But today I decided that why not reverse the roles and allow me to take the reins of the show and be the host. So today we'll be talking about power. Now, power is a
That's
very
a perfect
interesting.
episode for you to take over control of the. This is a great episode already.
It is, it is. So, today's topic will be about power. Now, power has existed forever. It's
Mm-hmm.
existed, for longer than most of us would probably assume. Listen, power will always be here, and it takes many different shapes, many different forms, and it's in the hands of many different people. People who look like me, people who look like Bradley, people who look like you. But power is also a very good and bad thing. Now, in itself, it was never meant, I truly believe, for it to be abused. But when you involve mankind, things always take a turn for the worse. So we'll be talking about power, the different forms of it, the most effective kind, and the worst way to use it. Which form of power is mostly, or we'll be going into our, as usual, a TED Ed video. I know Bradley usually show you guys, excuse me, a TED Talk video where there's a speaker. But today I decided to go to more infographic video route and show you guys the animation, one that TED Education offers its viewers. So we'll be going to that video right now, and then we'll come back, and then I'll just ask a few questions, and feel free to come up with the response. I know I'll be talking to Bradley, but just really think about the questions I'm asking you.
Mm-hmm.
It's very thought provoking and mind engaging. So just we'll get into the video.
Our focus is on the civic arena, where power means getting a community to make the choices and to take the actions that you want. There are 6 main sources of civic power. First, there's physical force and a capacity for violence. Control of the means of force, whether in the police or a militia, is power at its most primal. A second core source of power is wealth. Money creates the ability to buy results and to buy almost any other kind of power. The third form of power is state action, government. This is the use of law and bureaucracy to compel people to do or not do certain things. In a democracy, for example, we the people theoretically give government its power through elections. In a dictatorship, state power emerges from the threat of force, not the consent of the governed. The fourth type of power is social norms, or what other people think is okay. Norms don't have the centralized machinery of government. They operate in a softer way, peer-to-peer. But they can certainly make people change behavior and even change laws. Think about how norms around marriage equality today are evolving. The fifth form of power is ideas. An idea, individual liberty, say, or racial equality, can generate boundless amounts of power if it motivates enough people to change their thinking and actions. And so the sixth source of power is numbers, lots of humans. A vocal mass of people creates power by expressing collective intensity of interest and by asserting legitimacy. Think of the Arab Spring or the rise of the Tea Party. Crowds count. These are the six main sources of power. What power is.
So if you guys want to view that speech in its entirety, you can go to YouTube and actually type in Eric Liu. That's ERICLIU, Eric Liu or Eric Liu. I hope I'm saying his last name right. And you can finish that animation video, or you can view his actual speech in person in its entirety. It's about 17 minutes, and he gave this speech in the year 2014. So we know, and we have went over now after viewing this footage, 6 different forms of civic power. There was physical force, wealth, state action, social norms, ideas, and numbers. And now, Bradley, I wanted to discuss this with you because those are some pretty fair forms, different forms of power. I would say that those are really the most prevalent in society. So my first question would be, which way of power would you say is the most effective way of getting something done?
That's a tough question. Ideas. By a long shot. You can just look at the Nazi regime. That was all an idea. It was proven to be false. That's why the entire world literally collapsed on that one country to save it from, the oblivion of whatever that reign would have been, planetary wise. But look at Mahatma Gandhi, like his idea. Excuse me. He literally just had an idea. He was like, people should be treated equally. What is this? Why am I being treated? I got a law degree. I'm just like everyone else in England. Why are you trying to kick me off this train right now? Or push. I can't remember if they were kicking him off or making him move to the back or something like that. But basically, he just experienced like some just gross racism, and he was like, "Wait, what?" And his idea was, "Okay, the British should not be involved in these." That was literally just an idea, and then he took that idea, which created the energy for action. We got to do an episode on that eventually, so people have that basis, so I can start talking about it. But I think definitely ideas, like our idea right here, like just the idea to do this. Obviously, the platforms that exist, like YouTube and cameras and the community, but all those were also ideas. Like laws are ideas. I think ideas are the basic function of all. I mean, it's basically why we have anything that we call civilization or civilized activity, because we have the ability to create thought, then create the image of the stick that was sharpened to hunt the mammoth. You see what I'm saying? So without ideas, you don't get. I mean, wealth comes from ideas, which were ideas to help others, right? Or ideas from agriculture. Let's see. State. I mean, we already talked about that. The laws are all ideas. Norms are all ideas. Those change by country and by state.
Do you believe that the form of power, idea, and numbers go hand in hand? Because obviously you can have an idea, and if you don't have any backing, then it really doesn't. It won't be a form of power for you, but it would just remain an idea. Do you agree?
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, we can use those same examples. If no one followed any of those leaders we talked about, whether good or bad, they wouldn't have had any social power to get the laws passed or create the norms, right? So without having, some sort of, I think that's the power of technology in the current age. Is you have logistics. I mean, logistics is the backbone of like modern society, and well, I shouldn't say that. It's the backbone of efficiency in society. The ability to crunch numbers and see where you're failing, see where you can pick up at productivity, and I mean, you can do that with your idea, right? And so numbers and idea. That's why numbers were an idea, and then Pythagoras and all the people that I don't know a lot of the ancient mathematic like scholars who created algebra and all that, but you get my point. All those were ideas, and they were like, okay, how do I explain this to my neighbor so he stops feeding my goats, or whatever was, it probably arose from a problem. Some, like the neighbor was letting the goats get into his feed, and he wasn't feeding them right, so they were dying, and this guy was like, dude, I need this guy to understand. And, you know what I mean? And so that idea produced, just like we're trying to do here, our idea produced a solution for our lives in terms of like discipline, right? And so for me, I have a number that I crunch at the end of every day. It's called the self-sacrifice gauge. Basically, I look at all the tasks I put on my paper. They're all ideas, right, that I'm pursuing and trying to create a business, this YouTube channel. And so those ideas I take and I put some numbers behind them. Okay, at this time I need to do this for this long. That will produce the effective result that I'm looking for, right? So my idea is backed by numbers, and then those numbers will lead to the wealth. That's probably the second. I'd say that's the second stage in the power, in like the power structure of how you gain power. Ideas, the numbers, right? Like the person who learned how to in the Indus Valley and the Asiatic countries, all those people who like pioneered agriculture, like, and they could stockpile it then, like that turned into numbers and turned into wealth. I have this much grain. Okay, well, you've got 10 chickens, but you need the grain or you're going to die. So let me have 5 of the chickens for 4 of the grain. And then you're producing wealth, right? And then you produce laws. Well, this guy keeps making me sell my chickens at a quarter of the price of what they're really worth, but it's the only thing I can do. And then you go to the state and you say, can you please legislate this in a way where I can survive too, because I don't have the ability to travel over a mountain to sell my rice for the better price. And so communities get together. Then you have the laws. Then you get the norms. Those probably come before laws. The norms are what becomes laws. So you've got your 4th set. And what was it? Wealth. We already talked about wealth. It's 3, 3rd, and we're on the 5th. And then power comes from the people who are like, you know what? I don't want to trade you a quarter of a chicken. Instead of going to legislate, I have a sword. I'll just take your chickens, or I'll take your rice, or I'll force you to trade me at a fair price, right? Which is basically what law is. So I'd say that's probably how you want to think about those 6 laws in a productive way, right?
Correct. What, for my second question, which form of power would you, well, you probably would give the same answer, but which form of power would you say is the most powerful and why? Do you still believe that ideas would be the most powerful form of power?
You know,
or would you go ahead?
That's a good question. I think yes, just because I'm thinking like, okay, once ideas get going and it spirals up, they kind of take over for themselves and they become ideology. Like, think about like a fanatical like terrorist or something, right? They're not necessarily creating the idea, so it's not their personal cycle like we just of power, but they're like jumping in on a section, right? So they get like, so in that form, like maybe that kind of power might be more strong, but you still have to have the idea, right? So I still have to stick with ideas when it comes to the strength portion, like an overall percentage. But there is like those side spurts where you could say, okay, wealth created the ability for this person to skip those steps, and now they're a terrorist and they've got this power physically, but ideology, their ideological power doesn't really match up with the technology they have, right? Which is why like you don't see fanatical people as CEOs of companies, because in places where democracy is, which is ideas, wealth, blah blah blah, etc. Right? We just outlined the healthy structure. You're not going to get a terrorist most times, and if it's really hard. They have to be normally they're like insane people, like the Boston bomber and people like that, right? No, I think he was an actual terrorist, but I think like the Oklahoma City bomber. I'm talking about like domestic terrorism, like Americans. You have to like that's the same thing, but I think in our country you can see how democracy produces a much less likely chance that someone becomes radicalized in that same form, right? Like if in our country to access the higher forms of power like wealth, you have to have good ideology. That's the power. This is a great podcast. That is the power of democracy and independence and personal responsibility, which is the backbone of democracy, is that you can create your own power in a system that has basically no limiters outside of taking other people's chance to create their own power. And we follow that linear progression to protect us, because if you have a bad ideology, you're not going to accumulate wealth, which keeps you from becoming Hitler, which is why it's not okay to silence people, because you want to hear the dumb stuff they're saying. That way, when they try to gather power, we have a good record of what they're going to do with it, right? Like, so the cancel culture, that kind of stuff, I'm not going to, like, dip into that bucket and try to get, like, the radical view, like, the view, those radical view portions of YouTube. I mean, I want our ideals. You know what I mean? I want our ideal to be powerful enough that it creates enough wealth that enough people
Without
want to come
tapping
here.
into extremism.
Without
Yeah.
stepping into that cycle and saying, well, maybe we could just like I'd trying like taglines that are interesting, but the content itself, like I'm not gonna like I don't want to have clickbait content. Like the title, I get that. I'm just trying like algorithms and stuff. You got to get noticed. Once we have notoriety, we can just make episode 5, blah blah blah. Like you don't see Joe Rogan out here like episode 13. What's he on, like 16,000? Episode 1600 with these famous people who've written books and are MDs totally destroys the other opposition on their ideology. Absolutely eradicated their total base of viewership. You know what I mean? It's just Joe Rogan experience, this guy and this guy. And you know what I mean? There people have found enough value in the ideas that it's created that wealth in terms of his viewer base, right? So hopefully that's what we're going for. Man, this should be on the YouTube front page. Like this is gonna be a YouTube like user manual to creating genuine content. That's the question or the tagline.
Well, that was a good explanation, but I remember you talking about democracy and how those who are fanatics and extremists won't really be able to rise to power. And I want to challenge you on that because some say that even in America, we're only 2 steps away from tyranny.
I agree.
So I have to ask you, what as us as a people are to do then? Because America has only, what we've existed for how many, like 2 centuries, close to 3 centuries now.
Yeah.
I truly do believe that we are not, quote unquote, an empire that would last much longer. And I don't want to, that's a whole nother topic that we could get into.
I understand what you're saying. I was going to like lead into that a little bit, but I didn't want to.
We're not the value of our dollar, and I don't want to get too far off track, but the value of the US dollar is next to nothing. It's not really worth anything. If you burn it in front of my face, I wouldn't really come as a shock because it wouldn't mean anything if I was to hand it to a cashier, right? The value is so poor and so low now, that is being dumped by other nations in return for other currencies. So I want to ask you, Bradley, with that in mind, with that being a possibility, maybe it could even happen in our lifetime. Would you say that the form of power ideas would be then exchanged for physical force and state action? Because those two go hand in hand within a government that is more tyrannical.
Dude, I think are you asking like how close we are to get it, like how prevalent those are?
Like those, I'm asking you, like, wouldn't those two, to actually put this into a question, would not those two then be more of the more prevalent preferred use of power?
Yeah.
And some would say that is, that is the case on today. And I don't want to get too political here because you could almost say this podcast is apolitical, but
I would definitely say that. Let's keep
know,
that title, baby. I like that.
We're pretty much apolitical, but would you not argue that those two forms of power are really arguably more used than ideas and numbers?
Yeah. Well, I think that's why originally I started to go like, well, maybe that those have now become the preferred and more powerful, and I mean that in our country and in other countries too, like China. But their ideology is still strong. It's just I don't know if I completely agree with it. You know what I mean? I'd have to really
I know what you mean.
Examine it and like look into. I don't know enough about China to say whether they're just bad. Maybe I don't know. Let's not get into that. It's a whole different. But in terms of our country, like. For instance, the reason I bring up China is because in China, their children, now you call this tyranny, probably, but I actually had like a little bit of change of heart last night listening to a Joe Rogan podcast. It was the one with Tristan Harris. He's the guy from Facebook. Great podcast. Watch it if you guys have time. I have like half it left.
I follow him on Spotify.
Watch that. Seriously, it'd be great material to fuel your brain. But essentially, China, like, their kids, it's like 10 to 6 or something. TikTok's open for kids. And if you're under 14, you get like 2 hours. And if you're on TikTok at that age, you don't get influencers with big butts on your feed. What you get is science, patriotism, and like personal growth material. You see what I'm saying? Now, I'm not advocating for that. I'm just noticing the model and comparing it to what our children are being fed on a 24/7 basis, right? And then, so when it comes to, it's a great example because it's kind of the flip side where that's the radical version of the ideologies and the ideas. That's why free market is so important. So I'm not advocating that we should force our children to do some sort of same model, right? I'm saying culturally, independently, we have to take back that responsibility as parents, as communities, neighbors, friends, and when people in our life are messing up or they need guidance and we have that ability to guide them, it's on us at that point to do that and not just say, well, I'm too busy or I want to go do this or that. That supersedes, and I'm getting to your question, like we don't talk to each other anymore in our country. We get on social media and we get hyper viral content that socially radicalizes us and makes us more reactionary and less thoughtful and responsive. And so, like, for instance, they showed on that podcast, they literally showed a feed on Reddit that it looks just like a normal feed. It's literally all robots, not a single human comment in the feed, and it was just all radical, like, political talk, basically. It started off slow, and eventually someone was like, can't imagine. Like, the robot literally responded to its other robot saying, I can't even imagine sitting on this toxic channel for more than 5 seconds or something. And I'm like, oh, like, people have to understand, like, he was talking about there was, like, 2/3 of Christian religion. I don't want to say just Christian, but it was, like, religious groups on Facebook were actually just troll farms. 2/3. Now, think about this. The main voter base gets on Facebook. They're Christian, which is not a problem, right? Freedom of religion is a freedom in this country that I believe in. But you get on Facebook, you get invited to 5 different Christian groups, okay? And they're all troll farms, probably, or maybe 3.5 out of the 5 are likely to be troll farms, right? And now you're being fed automated AI information that's built to politically inflame you, right? And that's all you see all day. And instead of calling your neighbor who's Democratic and saying, hey, how do the Democrats really feel about this? Like you used to when there was when everyone was on the same phone line, right? And that would strengthen your ability to have a conversation with someone and disagree, but also get to the real, okay, well, I think this politician and your politician need to really just talk about this issue and stop focusing on the two that they're trying to, you see what I'm saying? Like they were talking about, like, I don't remember the people, but essentially a Democratic representative from the Senate was going to talk to a Republican Senate representative, but because the Democratic representative was painted as like an operative or something, like she had a news story on her, the Republican was like, look, I would love to meet with you and try to work out. I can't remember what bill they were working on. It was something important. But I can't now because my base thinks you're an op and they will hate me if I meet with you. And then he won't get reelected. So even if he is trying to do good, we're too irresponsible as people to look up, like, go to Google, the most powerful thing that's ever existed, the ability to literally have Alexander at your fingertips. Okay? Go look up the story. Go figure out if it's fake or not. Then go vote on the politician. Don't like and share a Facebook post that's likely misinformation. Okay? Because think about it. Let's just say, on average, 1/3 of your base is beginning 1/3 of your thread in terms of groups, profiles, whatever, is, imagine it being fake news, right? Imagine 1/3 being just basically unusable. Okay, and then you start to share that. It's not just the AIs at that point. You're literally creating a false reality. Okay, and then he was talking about how the algorithm will feed, like, everyone knows you get fed what you want. So you're literally getting fed 1/3 fake stuff. You're repeating it, so now it's 2/3 fake stuff on your feed, and then your friends repeat it back to you because you won't add anyone else with different opinions, so now it's 3/3, or 85% misinformation, 10% good information, 5% gossip, and that's what you're reading, and that's literally what's destroying the fabric of America. Like, the reason China is so strong is because they literally say, no, you can't have social media. They turn it off across all provinces. I think that's what they call their, like, states. They literally turn it off at the same time every night. Seriously. Right. Like, if you're in the military, you can't have a Facebook because they're like, no, people can literally hack this and use it to gain military information about us. And obviously, I'm not advocating this. I'm just noticing the models, right? Like, notice the difference in the kid you went to school with who didn't sit on social media all day, like where they're at in life and stuff. And what we're doing here is we're trying to extract the little nuggets, right? So don't get hyper caught up on the political aspects. Look at the broad message that I'm trying to paint here. Like, these tools of power that Alex is describing have to start with us. That is how democracy works. When he talks about going into the tyranny, that's what we're doing. If you look at ancient Greece and ancient Rome, what happened is the people stopped becoming responsible wholesale, and they turned into a commodity-based. They didn't really make anything, right? They just imported and they spent all their money on spice from India. Like, we literally, almost all of the base level jobs in our country are like food jobs. I shouldn't say that. Probably not all of them. I should look up the stats. But, I mean, think about how many signs you drive by Taco Bell, Wendy's, all these places that literally cannot hire people anymore because they've had a taste of freedom. And they're like, I don't want to work at this place to make food. That it's because you're in a feedback system that's wasting energy, and you know it. Like, even if you become the owner of McDonald's, you're making shitty food. You're making a cow into less quality material to sell it for cheaper for ideology that's not really what our country is based around anymore. I think people like posture that we're still this like hyper like rigid like economic, you know what I mean, like capitalistic, we got to make money. But I think most people nowadays are kind of like not soft, but more soft in terms of their ability to like empathize with someone and say like, okay, I can see you don't want to work 60 hours a week. Not, oh, well, you're just a lazy guy. You got to pull yourself up from the bootstraps. You know what I mean? Like, I'm probably putting in 80 hours of work. It's inefficient work because I'm trying to start business and do all these things, right? But out of the waking hours I'm up during the week, I think it's like 165, then you minus 60 for sleep or something. But you end up, I can't remember the number, but you end up like 90 hours to work. But I mean, these are inefficient, right? I'm daddling, I'm doing this and that, not hanging up curtains to block my plant lights and stuff. But I'm getting better at it. But I'm taking responsibility for my economic ability, which is making me learn, and I'm giving that knowledge to my family. Now they're all becoming more personally responsible. This is what we're doing. This is what we need to do. It's just hard. People don't want to do it. And that's what's causing all these power loops to get, okay, well, I'll just recirculate this ideology because I don't have to go do the work to search up the damn Google ad or the Google message. Or you literally type Google Scholar and boom, hundreds of scholarly reports. I'm not going to name the trial, but was this recent trial with an underage kid who clearly didn't actually break any laws. Like, people were saying he, like, I don't want to get into it, but the misinformation was crazy. Like, he shot people that weren't there. He shot people that were different colors than the people he shot. Like, and people still are like, nope, it's false. The videos are online. That's literally how you can tell people. Like, you can tell it's happening. So, I think we need to regulate social media personally. Because the second we say government, we need to, you know what I mean? You need to regulate this. We're giving them our power, and that's going to go into the power loop because that's the top of the cycle. It's not going to feed back down. I can tell you that right now. What's going to come back down is the shit. Because that's just how human nature works. If the ideology doesn't line up with, like, listen to the story about that governor. It's us holding us back from letting our politicians be able to have conversations, the one that still want to. And then we wonder why we get corrupt politicians and people that don't actually want to do things with their life, with their agency and power that they have. Literally the apex of power in human society, American politics, almost probably not anymore because of the other countries are so much more serious about, like, we have to just start taking responsibility. I'm not going to get super in-depth, and I think this is probably the end before I go on another 4-hour rant, but take responsibility. Make your bed. Like, my bed doesn't look made, but underneath that protective sheet is made. My dogs like to lay on the bed, and I love my dogs, but I can promise you the bed is made. The reason that light's on is because those plants have to live, because that's one of my side businesses. I'm making a bonsai business. Plus, I just like it. But I'm just these little examples. I water those trees every day. I got up at 6:45 today. It should have got up at 6:30. Got my ass over here. I looked up some YouTube videos on how to make our channel better, did some research. You know what I mean? What I'm saying is I'm taking control of my time. I'm not giving it to other people to think for me. And the people that do think for me are the people who are accredited. And I listen to them and then I say, oh, okay, I understand your ideas. I trust this book that you're recommending. Then I read the book. Okay, I trust them even more. Then you trust that circle. Then you start to develop layers of personal response. I call them layers of understanding. When you read a book, you get one more layer. I've talked to you about this. And then like it's like pouring water on top. When someone says something idiotic like this didn't happen, but it actually did because I heard it on my feed, it filters through and the layer that says I have a college degree goes, well, it's pretty easy to look on Google. And I'm not saying you need a college degree to look on Google, but a high school degree, oh, it's pretty good to look on Google. My mom at 10 taught me to look on Google. Oh, it's pretty good to look on Google. See what I mean? Like, it's not hard to develop these traits in people to be self-sufficient. That's the main thing. Like, when I work on my workshop for when I talk to these community leaders here in a few weeks, that's the main thing I want to emphasize is we have to give kids the tools to teach themselves how to learn. To teach themselves to be responsible.
You're right.
And have
Yeah,
this
I
teach,
agree.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I didn't know how to learn until literally like 2 years into college, and then I realized, holy shit, I'm just gonna have to excuse my language. Holy crap, I'm literally just gonna have to sit here and fail until I, you know what I mean? And then what that translated to was just 6 hours instead of 2 hours. Now I can do a philosophy, like if I took philosophy class again, like philosophy, whatever the intro. You and I would probably smash that class in a quarter of the time because we've already done the pre-latent work. Like, we've got A's in the class. I don't know if you got an A, but I won't blast you.
Oh, I sure did.
That's right, baby. But
Yeah.
that's like 6 hours per task, reading, record, you know what I mean? Not recording, right?
I'm guilty of not even doing all of that, but yeah.
But that's the power of discipline, though.
Yeah,
I didn't take the
correct.
final exam for that class, and I still passed. I was able to take that time and work on it. Yes, I did the math. I follow every class I do because I failed so many. I do the math per assignment. What I get is that's why I'm like, you grade those assignments yet, Amber? Professor? You got those grades in? Because I'm sitting there and I'm going, okay, I'm at a 95. And then I got to the end and I was like, man, I really don't feel like doing this paper. Like, I know this. And she knew I knew it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get a 90. But when I sit down and talk to somebody who like would care about that, I can explain, okay, I had these other classes that I, like my Spanish class, in my math class, I barely passed. So I took that time and went and studied for that shit because I know philosophy. There's one thing I know this. I might not know the quotes, you know what I mean? Yeah. But that's why we made this channel, right? Correct. But that comes from personally being responsible to learn the material. That's why you're not confident in school, guys. That's why you're not you're in high school, you're in middle school. That's why you're not confident. That's why you get that anxiety before every test. That's why I did, because I didn't take the personal discipline and time to go and learn the stuff, so that way when I showed up, I was looking into the abyss of all this information. I had no preference to study, so the lectures didn't get in, and then halfway through the class, you're gone. You're not going to make that up like that. That's hours and hours, right?
You know, they say that, well, they shouldn't, they don't say this as often, even though they should, but, you know, success really does also come from preparation. I wish that part would be said more. I know people love to say, you know, hard work beats talent. You know, hard work leads to success, but preparation is actually what prepares you to succeed.
Dude, I love prepping, dude.
It just, you have to take the time to do things. You know, don't skip steps. You know, follow each and every step. Listen, you're not going to get a 6-pack in 6 minutes. Okay,
I can promise you that.
You got to stop clicking on those ads. You're not going to find a local MILF. You get what I'm saying? You're not going to find
what sites are you on, bro?
I'm just let's just be real. You're not going to find a local MILF who's
no, you're not.
away.
Nah.
You got to follow each and every step. And I know that didn't have nothing to do with power, but, you know.
No, that definitely has something to do with power. That's a form of power on its own. Like, and that's a way of manipulating it, sexual power. I mean, that's definitely prevalent in society. That probably goes right between power and force.
That's actually true.
You know what I mean? It goes right below physical force.
You know, so just follow each and every step. You have to understand that there's a way of doing things which is decent and in order, and it's when you step out of bounds, and it's when you're out of order when things don't go right. That's why Bradley said you don't feel confident, you don't feel a surety within yourself to be able to do something and do it well. It's because you didn't prepare. So
Correct.
Take the time that you need to prepare, and you won't fail as often as you probably used to. I want to thank you all today on clicking on this morning's episode. This was a very
this
good
one was
topic
fire.
to talk about.
This was good.
We could have went much more deeper into this. We could have went much
Part 2
longer.
coming soon.
Part 2 will be coming soon. Me and Bradley are both busy, so we wanted to get this out there because consistency is key in order to succeed in everything you do. So we don't take too long of a break between each and every day. We had to get this to you guys. I want to thank you for watching today's video. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, comment, and share the video. Show your friends, show your mom, your dad if he cares at all. Show your co-workers.
Why you say it like that?
Out there. Well, more dads are more so.
Yeah. My dad's like
dads
that
are
too,
more so
kind of.
this
I'll be like, "Yo, Dad, I got this going on with it." He's like, "Corvettes? I love you, son." No.
Right.
He loves me, but he ain't trying to talk about me.
Yeah. Just show everybody, we're really trying to. We don't just do this for us. Again, I say this often. We don't do this for the money. We're doing this for free because we really do care. We're investing in you all, and in turn, you all may teach us something new as we'll be having more guests on here. So I want to thank you all for taking the time to watch this episode, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you very much.
Have a good night, guys. Little examples. I water those trees every day. I got up at 6:45 today. It should have got up at 6:30. Got my SO. Okay, let's do like a thumbnail real quick. Give me like a.
No, I'm not doing. No, I'm not doing. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna try and look serious, like. Bradley gonna have me getting made fun of. He gonna have me getting made fun of.